What's going on, everyone? This is Mr. Dicken. In this video, we are going to be discussing how to solve quadratics by a process called completing the square. So these will be answers that will not be able to factor sometimes, which means if it doesn't factor out, there's a chance we could get irrational answers. Irrational meaning there might be some radicals along the way. Now, completing the square revolves around the idea that if we had some sort of a trinomial, so I'll use a simple one here, let's say x squared plus 6x plus 9. If we have a perfect square trinomial, so a special case factor pattern, that can factor down into a binomial, so two terms squared. If that is set equal to some number, we could then solve that equation by simply taking the square root of each side to get rid of a squared, and then moving whatever number here is in that spot. So this revolves around the notion that we can identify patterns in which the middle term will be twice as big as this number here, and the last term, the c value, will be the squared form of that number there. What we're going to be seeing is a whole lot of taking the b value, let me erase that here, taking the b value and chopping it in half, and then taking whatever that number is and squaring it. So b value chopped in half is 3, and then we squared it to get 9. So that's going to be the overall process here when we solve by completing the square. All right. Looks like we got 4 problems, so it should not take us terribly long to do. One advantage to completing the square also is that it's very mental math friendly. So if you are a person, if you're like me and you don't like wasting the time punching things into a calculator, it's good mental math practice. Okay, here we go. So first example, we have x squared minus 2x minus 20. First thing we're going to do is really focus our attention on the first two terms, the a and the b terms. So x squared minus 2x. That being said, I don't really care about this 20 right now, so I'm going to move that to the other side by adding it over. So we're going to have x squared minus 2x, and I'm going to leave a little blank space there, equals 24. All right, so like I said, we're going to really focus in on this left side now that it's just the x squared and the minus 2x. And we're going to think what number would have to go into this c value so that the left side here is a perfect square trinomial, so that the left side follows that factor pattern that we discussed. Because ultimately, I'd want to write this left side as x plus or x minus something squared equals 24, so then I can solve it from there. Well, the way we do that is we're going to take our b value and chop it in half. So the b value is negative 2. If I chop that in half, I'll get negative 1. And then we'll square that. So after you take half of b, you're then going to square it. And when I square negative 1 times negative 1 is going to be a positive 1. So what I've done is kind of filled in the blank and said, okay, we want to see a plus 1 at the end of this. Because if there was a plus 1 there, I'm allowed to factor it, and this is what it would look like when it's factored. But I can't just add a plus 1 all willy-nilly, right? Because I have to maintain balance. So if I add a plus 1 to one side, I have to add a plus 1 to the other side as well. So whatever gets added to the left side of the equation must get added to the right side. Okay, so now we have a plus 1. So this is x minus 1 quantity squared equals 24 plus 1, well that's 25. So we factored out the left-hand side, and all constant values are moved over to the right. Well, now we can solve this, right? X minus 1 quantity squared, I want to get rid of the squared, so I'll square root each side. A square root and a squared knock each other out, so I'm just left with x minus 1. The square root of 25, well, hey, that's a clean number. Well, the square root of 25 is going to be 5. Or maybe it's negative 5. Remember, when you take a square root, you're going to have two results, right? A positive and a negative. So we're going to have two separate equations to solve based on that square root. So x minus 1 equals 5, x minus 1 equals negative 5. And those 5's came from the square root of 25. All right, so our two answers now, if I add 1 to the other side, we'll get x equals 6, or x equals, that'd be negative 4. Cool. So this one actually turned out to give us clean numbers. If it gives you clean numbers or pretty fractions, then it turns out that you could have factored that problem. All right, next one. X squared plus 16x minus 22. All right. I want to focus my attention on the first two terms. Anything that is not those first two terms will get kicked out to the other side. So if I move that 22 to the other side by adding it, that's how I get rid of a minus 22. On the right-hand side, I will have, let's see, negative 5 plus 22, 17. And I'm also going to put a blank side over here just as a reminder to myself that whatever goes on the left side of the equation has to go on the right side of the equation as well to maintain balance. All right, so now let's play a little what if. What do we wish was in that blank space that would give us permission to write this as x plus or x minus something squared? Well, we're going to take half of the b value. That would be a positive 8. And then we're going to square it. 8 squared, that's 64. That'll always be a positive. So on the right-hand side, I have 17 plus 64. Well, 10 plus 64 is 74, plus 7 is now 81. So from here, square root to get rid of the squared, we're going to get x plus 8 equals a positive or a negative 9. So you could write that as plus or minus 9 if you want to, or you could write it as two separate equations. To get x by itself, I'd have to subtract 8. So 9 minus 8, and then negative 9 minus 8, what are each of those respectively? We would get 1 and negative 17. Those would be our two answers. All right, halfway there. Next one. X squared minus 8x minus 60 equals 64. First things first, let's get rid of that 60. Kick that over to the other side. So I've got x squared minus 8x blank space equals 124 blank space. So now we have to play a little what if. What do I want to see in that blank space so that I can write this as a factored form of x plus or x minus something squared? Well, to do that, I'm going to take half of my b value and then square it. Whatever number goes in this blank will also go into that blank over there. All right, let's see. Half of negative 8 is negative 4. Square that, I get a positive 16. Positive 16. So now this equation is turned into x minus 4 quantity squared. And remember, x minus 4 squared is just the factored form of that trinomial right above it. So x minus 4 quantity squared equals 124 plus 16. See, 124 plus 10 is 134, plus 6 is 140. Apparently I'm writing with red. All right, now to solve. Square root each side. Shaboom, shaboom. Left side is x minus 4 equals square root of 140. I don't know. So I'm just going to call that plus or minus rad 140. To get x by itself, we need to add 4 to the other side. So the way we'd write this is x equals 4 plus or minus the square root of 140. Now, if I needed to have a decimal approximation, we would need to go through and figure out, okay, what is the square root of 140? It would be 11 point something, so you'd have 4 plus 11 point whatever and 4 minus 11 point whatever, round accordingly. But leaving it in radical form like this is the most exact way to write it. Also, this little plus or minus symbol gives me two answers in one. Little buy one, get one free action. Last problem. Here we go. Party time. Let's do it. X squared minus 10x minus 75 equals 5. So again, we're going to focus our attention on the first two terms, x squared minus 10x, and what do we need to see in that blank over there? Which means the 75 got booted to the other side. So x squared minus 10x blank space, equals, that would be 80, followed by the same blank space. We want to ask ourselves, what would have to go into this blank spot so that it's a perfectly factorable, perfect square trinomial? So we're going to take half of negative 10 and square that value. Half of negative 10 is negative 5. Square that, I get positive 25. Whatever goes to one side of the equation must also go to the other so that we maintain balance. 80 plus 25 is 105. And now we can square root to solve. So I've got x minus 5 equals plus or minus the radical of 105, because that's not going to be a clean number. Not going to be a clean number. Final answer, move the 5 over. 5 plus or minus rad 105. Boom. Done. You'll notice with the second and third problems that we did, we had radicals in the answer. Anytime you have a scenario in which your final answer has a radical, that means it is not factorable. So if we tried setting those things equal to 0 and factoring them out, we're not going to get an answer, because if it's not a rational value, meaning a clean fraction or clean integer, then it is not factorable. All right, that's all I've got. You know the drill. If you have questions, let me know. Good luck. Have fun. Be safe. Roll Tide.